In a world where royal protocol dictates every gesture, where cameras capture every breath, and where the slightest deviation from tradition makes headlines across continents, there exists a profound truth that transcends crowns and titles. Love, in its purest form, recognizes no boundaries, not even those carved by centuries of royal tradition. What happens when the weight of duty collides with the tender vulnerability of human emotion? When does a simple embrace become a symbol that resonates with millions of hearts across the globe? Sometimes, the most powerful moments in history aren't found in grand speeches or elaborate ceremonies, but in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, where two souls connect despite the watching world. This is the story of one such moment. A farewell that would be remembered not for its royal grandeur, but for its raw, authentic humanity. A moment when Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, reminded the world that beneath the titles and tiaras, love speaks a universal language that knows no protocol. Their tender embrace wasn't planned by palace officials or choreographed for maximum impact. It simply happened as natural as breathing, as necessary as sunrise. And in that spontaneous gesture, millions found something they had been searching for, a reminder that love, genuine and unguarded, still exists in our carefully curated world. The cameras rolled, the world watched, and in that single moment, two people became more than royals. They became a reflection of every couple who has ever had to say goodbye, every heart that has ever ached with the weight of separation, and every love story that has ever dared to be vulnerable in the face of an unforgiving world. This is their story. This is our story. This is what happens when humanity meets royalty and love wins. The morning mist hung low over the tarmac at RAF Nordholt, creating an almost ethereal backdrop for what would become one of the most emotionally charged departures in recent royal history. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood at the edge of the restricted area, her elegant coat billowing slightly in the early autumn breeze. Her hands, usually so composed and graceful during public appearances, betrayed the slightest tremor as she clutched a small envelope, a letter she had written the night before, but wasn't sure she would have the courage to give. Prince William emerged from the military briefing building, his uniform crisp and formal, yet his eyes immediately sought hers across the distance. The official duties that had consumed the past 3 hours seemed to fade into insignificance as their gazes met. This wasn't just another royal engagement or ceremonial departure. This was personal, profoundly so, and everyone present could feel the weight of the moment settling around them like a heavy blanket. The deployment to the Commonwealth realms had been planned for months, a crucial diplomatic mission that would see William representing the crown across 3 continents over the course of 6 weeks. It was an honor, a responsibility he embraced wholeheartedly, yet the timing couldn't have been more challenging. Catherine had recently returned to her royal duties after a period of recovery, and their 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, were navigating their own adjustments to increase public attention and the demands of their royal education. As William approached, Catherine noticed the way his shoulders carried not just the weight of his uniform's decorations, but the invisible burden of duty that had shaped their lives since the moment they said "I do" in Westminster Abbey all those years ago. She had watched him evolve from the young man she fell in love with at university into the future king he was destined to become. Yet in moments like these, she still saw the boy who had once nervously asked her to dance at a charity event, who had stumbled over his words when he first told her he loved her. The media presence was significant, but maintained at a respectful distance, as had been negotiated by the palace communications team. Yet Catherine knew that every gesture, every expression, every second of this farewell would be scrutinized, analyzed, and interpreted by people around the world. The pressure of public life had taught them both to be measured in their displays of affection, to save their most intimate moments for the privacy of their homes. But today felt different. Today, something in the air suggested that authenticity might matter more than protocol. William reached her side, and, for a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, two people who had learned to communicate volumes without words. The sound of aircraft engines in the distance reminded them both that time was running short. The Royal Air Force crew was conducting final checks on the aircraft that would carry him away from everything that mattered most to him. The children wanted to come, Catherine said softly, her voice carrying just enough to reach him over the ambient noise of the airfield. George especially. He said it wasn't fair that he couldn't see Papa off on his adventure. William smiled, the kind of smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made Catherine fall in love with him all over again. "Perhaps it's better this way," he replied, his voice thick with an emotion he was trying to keep in check. School goodbyes are hard enough without adding cameras and protocol officers. They had said their private farewells that morning at Kensington Palace, a family breakfast that had stretched longer than usual as each child found another reason to delay their father's departure. Lewis had insisted on showing William every single one of his new drawings. Charlotte had presented him with a carefully crafted friendship bracelet that she had worked on for days, threading each bead with the concentration of a master craftsperson. George, trying to be brave and mature beyond his years, had simply hugged his father a little tighter and a little longer than usual. The weight of leaving them behind was something William carried heavily. Each deployment, each royal tour, each duty that took him away from his family was a reminder of the price that came with their position. Catherine understood this burden perhaps better than anyone. She had chosen this life, had walked into it with her eyes open, yet the reality of royal duty was something that could only be truly understood through experience. A palace aide approached discreetly, indicating that the final preparations were complete and the departure schedule needed to be maintained. William nodded acknowledgement, but made no move to leave Catherine's side just yet. These stolen moments before official duty called were precious, and both of them had learned not to take them for granted. "I'll miss our morning walks," Catherine said, referring to their private ritual of walking through the gardens at Kensington Palace before the children woke up. It was often the only time in their day when they could talk without interruption, plan without agenda, and simply be a married couple rather than public figures. "I'll miss everything," William replied, his honesty cutting through the formal atmosphere around them. "Your laugh when Lewis does something particularly mischievous. The way you hum while you're reading the morning briefings. The way you always know exactly what to say when I'm doubting myself." The conversation was interrupted by a respectful cough from the flight crew chief, who needed William to complete the final passenger manifest and security protocols. Royal travel, even more than commercial aviation, required extensive documentation and security clearances that couldn't be delayed. William squeezed Catherine's hand gently before stepping away to complete the necessary formalities. While he was occupied with the departure procedures, Catherine found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Their relationship had weathered public scrutiny, private doubts, family expectations, and the constant pressure of living under the world's most powerful microscope. Yet here they stood, still choosing each other every day, still finding ways to protect their love from the forces that sought to complicate it. She remembered their early days of dating, when they could still slip away for quiet dinners in small pubs, when their biggest concern was whether William would pass his geography exam rather than whether his diplomatic mission would successfully strengthen Commonwealth relations. Those simpler times felt both a lifetime ago and like yesterday. The wind picked up slightly, causing Catherine's hair to dance around her face in a way that the photographers would later describe as cinematically perfect. But in that moment, she wasn't thinking about how she looked or how the images would be received by the public. She was thinking about the man she married, about the father her children adored, about the partner who had stood by her through every challenge their unique life had presented. William completed his official duties and returned to her side, the formalities finished, but the hardest part still ahead. The actual goodbye loomed before them, and both could feel the weight of the coming separation settling in their chests like a physical ache. 6 weeks isn't forever, Catherine said, as much to convince herself as to comfort him. 6 weeks is 42 days, William replied, and She could hear the mathematics of longing in his voice. 42 bedtime stories I'll miss reading. 42 dinners without your terrible jokes. 42 mornings without waking up to your face. Despite the emotion of the moment, Catherine laughed softly at his reference to her jokes. It was a long-standing, playful argument between them. She maintained that her humor was sophisticated and clever, while he insisted it was wonderfully, endearingly awful. These small intimacies, these private jokes, and shared references were the foundation upon which their public partnership was built. The final call came from the aircraft, echoing across the tarmac with the authority of duty calling. William would have to board soon, and they both knew that once he stepped onto that plane, the next time they would be together would be measured in weeks rather than minutes. As they stood facing each other, the weight of their roles seemed to fade into the background. The cameras, the protocol, the watching world, all of it became secondary to the simple truth of two people who loved each other saying goodbye. In that space between duty and departure, between public expectation and private emotion, something profound was about to unfold that would remind the world why their love story had captured so many hearts. The moment stretched between them like a bridge spanning past and future, present, and possibility. William reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small, worn leather journal, one that Catherine recognized immediately. It was the same journal he had carried during their university days, the one where he used to sketch architectural designs and write down random thoughts during their long study sessions in the library. "I found this last night while packing," he said, offering it to her. "Look at page 47. With trembling fingers, Catherine opened the journal to the designated page. There, in William's careful handwriting from over 20 years ago, were the words, "Someday, I'm going to marry Catherine Middleton. Someday, I'm going to be brave enough to tell her she's the most extraordinary person I've ever met. Someday, I'm going to build a life with her that matters." Tears that had been threatening to surface all morning finally spilled over Catherine's cheeks. She looked up at him, seeing not the future king or the distinguished prince, but the young man who had been brave enough to dream of a future with her when neither of them could have imagined the path that lay ahead. "You wrote this during finals week," she whispered, remembering that particularly stressful time when they had both been drowning in textbooks and caffeine. "I thought you were just taking notes about sustainable development projects." "I was," William replied, his own eyes glistening. "But you kept making these little comments about how we could actually make a difference in the world, and I realized I didn't want to make a difference without you. I wanted to write it down, make it real somehow." The journal entry was more than just a sweet memory. It was a testament to the foundation of their relationship. Even as young adults, they had shared a vision of service, of using their education and eventual positions to create positive change. That shared purpose had sustained them through the challenges of royal life, through the criticism and praise, through the moments when duty felt overwhelming, and the moments when love felt like the only thing that made sense. Catherine closed the journal carefully, holding it against her chest like a treasure. "I can't take this with you," she said. "This is your journey journal. You've carried it on every important trip since university." "Which is exactly why you should have it now," William replied, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Every important journey I've taken has been possible because you were either beside me or supporting me from home. This time, I want you to have something that reminds you that every step I take is still connected to every step we take together." The gesture was quintessentially William, thoughtful, deeply personal, and grounded in their shared history rather than grand romantic gestures. It was the kind of intimacy that had defined their relationship from the beginning, built on understanding each other's inner worlds rather than impressive displays of affection. Around them, the departure preparations continued with quiet efficiency. The security detail maintained their professional distance while staying alert to every movement and potential threat. The media representatives captured the scene from their designated positions, aware they were witnessing something significant, but not yet understanding the full emotional weight of what was unfolding. "The children will want a video call every evening," Catherine said, shifting into the practical considerations that would define the next 6 weeks. "Charlotte has already planned a series of art projects to show you, and Lewis wants to demonstrate his progress with reading. George. She paused, knowing that their eldest child was struggling with the weight of understanding more about royal duty than his siblings. George is worried about whether he wants this life. William finished her thought, as he so often did. They had both noticed their son's increasing questions about duty, service, and the cost of being born into their particular family. At his age, William himself had begun to understand what it meant to be second in line to the throne, and he recognized the same internal struggle in George. He asked me last night if you wish you could just be a regular pilot instead of a prince, Catherine continued. I told him that you love flying, but you love serving people even more. I'm not sure he understood the difference. William nodded thoughtfully. The challenge of raising children who would inherit enormous responsibility while trying to give them as normal a childhood as possible was something they navigated daily. Every decision, from school choices to public appearances, was weighed against the dual goals of preparation and protection. When I get back, I want to take him flying, William said suddenly. Not for any official purpose, just because he loves it. Let him experience the joy of aviation without the weight of duty attached. It was moments like these that reminded Catherine why she had fallen in love with William in the first place. Beneath the royal training and public responsibilities, he remained fundamentally a father who wanted to give his children the world while protecting them from its harsher realities. A gentle rain began to fall, just enough to create a soft pattering sound on the aircraft nearby. The weather seemed to match the bittersweetness of the moment. Not quite sunny, not quite stormy, but something beautifully in between. Catherine pulled her coat closer, and without thinking, William stepped closer to shield her from the breeze that carried the rain. I have something for you too, Catherine said, reaching in her handbag and withdrawing the letter she had been carrying. Unlike William's spontaneous sharing of the journal, this gift had been carefully planned, written, and rewritten several times the night before. William accepted the envelope with a question in his eyes. Catherine's handwriting on the front simply said "for the quiet moments," which could have meant anything, but somehow conveyed everything. Don't read it now, she said quickly. Save it for when you're missing home. When the diplomatic dinners feel endless and the hotel rooms feel empty. When you need a reminder of why what you're doing matters. William slipped the letter into his jacket pocket, next to his heart, a gesture that wasn't lost on Catherine. She had watched him make the same protective movement with precious items throughout their relationship. The first love letter she had ever written him, the hospital bracelet from George's birth, the pressed flower from their first anniversary bouquet. Promise me something, Catherine said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. Promise me you'll remember that representing the crown doesn't mean you have to carry everything alone. The people you're visiting want to connect with you, with who you really are, not just the title. It was advice born from years of watching William struggle with the balance between accessibility and dignity, between genuine connection and royal protocol. Catherine had seen him at his best when he allowed his natural warmth and curiosity to shine through the formal requirements of his role. I promise, William said, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words. But you have to promise me something too. Promise me you'll take care of yourself, not just everyone else. The children need you healthy and happy, not perfect. This was their ongoing negotiation, the way they took care of each other across distance and duty. Catherine had a tendency to pour herself into supporting others while neglecting her own needs, just as William sometimes carried the weight of representing the future of the monarchy as a personal burden rather than a shared responsibility. The rain continued to fall gently, creating an almost private cocoon around them despite the activity continuing elsewhere on the airfield. Staff members went about their duties with quiet efficiency, allowing the royal couple these final moments together without unnecessary interruption. I keep thinking about our wedding day, Catherine said suddenly, her mind drifting to another moment when the world had been watching, when the pressure had been immense, but when their connection had somehow transcended all of it. The moment when we were walking back down the aisle? William asked, knowing exactly what she meant. When you whispered that we had done it, That we were actually married, and nothing could change that, Catherine confirmed. I felt like we had just stolen something precious from the universe, something that belonged to us despite all the cameras and ceremony. I feel the same way now, William said softly. Like this moment, right here, is ours. Whatever happens over the next 6 weeks. However, many people analyze every photo and statement. This conversation belongs to us. The sentiment captured something essential about their relationship, the ability to create intimate spaces even in the most public circumstances. It was a skill they had developed out of necessity, but had refined into an art form, finding ways to be authentically themselves even when the world was watching. The final boarding call echoed across the tarmac with the inexorable authority of duty calling. William's security detail began their subtle movements, the kind of choreographed preparation that happened before every royal departure. Yet neither William nor Catherine seemed ready to acknowledge that their time was running out. They stood facing each other, hands clasped, as if they could somehow hold back time through sheer force of will. "Tell me about the first stop again," Catherine said, though she had already memorized every detail of his itinerary. It was a way of extending their conversation, of keeping him present for just a few more moments. "Australia first," William replied, understanding her need to visualize his journey. 3 days in Sydney for the Climate Change Summit, then Brisbane for the Youth Leadership Conference. The Governor-General is particularly excited about the renewable energy initiatives we'll be announcing. As he spoke, Catherine could see the shift beginning to happen, the way William's mind started to engage with the important work ahead of him. It was something she had observed over the years, his ability to compartmentalize personal emotion in service of his duties, while never losing sight of what truly mattered to him. It was both a strength and something that worried her, this capacity to set aside his own needs for the greater good. "The young people you'll meet," Catherine continued, "remember that they need to see your passion, not just your position. Some of them have never had anyone in authority actually listen to their ideas about the future." William nodded, appreciating her insight. Catherine had always possessed an intuitive understanding of how to connect with people, particularly young people who often felt dismissed by traditional institutions. Her advice had shaped many of his most successful public engagements over the years. "I wish you could come with me," he said suddenly, the words escaping before he could censor them. They both knew it was impossible. Catherine's own responsibilities at home, the children's schedules, the careful balance of royal duties that required them to sometimes work separately to maximize their impact. "I'll be with you," Catherine replied, touching her hand to her heart and then to his. "Every speech, every meeting, every moment when you have to be brave, I'll be right there with you." It wasn't just romantic sentiment. It was a practical truth about how they had learned to work as a team, even when separated by continents. Catherine would follow his journey through briefings and media reports, offering advice and support through their video calls, helping him process the challenges and celebrate the successes. The rain had stopped, and a subtle shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting everything in a golden light that photographers would later describe as magical. But in that moment, William and Catherine were aware only of each other, of the weight of separation settling between them like a physical presence. "I need to tell you something," William said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "This morning, when I was getting dressed, I found myself choosing the cologne you bought me for our anniversary instead of the usual one. I wanted to carry something of you with me." Catherine's breath caught slightly. It was such a small detail, but it spoke to the intimate ways they carried each other through their daily lives. "I put one of your old Oxford sweaters in my suitcase," she admitted. "The blue one that's too big for me, but smells like home." These confessions of small intimacies created a bubble of privacy around them, even with the awareness of cameras and observers. They were sharing the kinds of details that couples everywhere would recognize. The little ways love manifests in daily life, the comfort found in familiar scents and textures, the desire to maintain connection across distance. A photographer in the distance adjusted his lens, and the slight movement reminded them both of the public nature of their farewell. Yet instead of stepping apart or becoming more formal, something shifted between them. Catherine moved slightly closer to William, and he responded by placing his hands gently on her arms, creating a kind of intimate frame that seemed to shut out the watching world. "Do you remember," Catherine said softly, "when we used to say goodbye at the train station when you were stationed in Wales? How we promised each other that no matter how hard it got, we would never become the kind of couple that just went through the motions." William smiled at the memory. Those had been difficult days when he was training with the Royal Air Force, and their relationship was still finding its footing under the pressure of public scrutiny. They had been younger then, less certain of their future, but perhaps more willing to take emotional risks. "We promised we would always choose to see each other," he replied, recalling their exact word from those train platform conversations. "Not just look at each other, but really see who the other person was becoming." "I see you," Catherine said now, her eyes holding his with the kind of intensity that had first drawn them together all those years ago. "I see how much this deployment means to you, how excited you are to represent our values on the world stage. I see how much leaving us behind costs you. I see the man I married and the king you're becoming, and I love both of them completely." The words hung between them like a bridge spanning not just the physical distance they were about to endure, but the emotional complexity of their unique life together. William felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he hadn't even realized he was carrying about whether Catherine truly understood the competing demands on his heart and attention. "I see you too," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I see how you've grown into this role without losing yourself. I see how you mother our children with such wisdom and patience. I see the way you carry our family's heart while I carry our public duties. I see the woman I fell in love with and the partner I couldn't do any of this without." The exchange was more than romantic declaration. It was a mutual recognition of how they had evolved both individually and as a couple under the extraordinary pressures of their position. They had learned to see each other clearly, not despite their circumstances, but because of the depth of understanding those circumstances required. Standing there in the soft light filtering through the dispersing clouds, they embodied something that had become increasingly rare in public life: authentic vulnerability. The cameras captured their closeness, but the real intimacy was in their willingness to be genuinely present with each other despite knowing the world was watching. "The children drew pictures for your hotel rooms," Catherine said, reaching in her bag and withdrawing a carefully wrapped package. "Lewis insisted on including one of his dinosaur drawings for each country you'll visit. He said the dinosaurs would keep you company and help you remember that he loves you." William accepted the package with the solemnity of receiving a state treasure. He understood that for Lewis, those drawings represented countless hours of careful work, a 5-year-old's attempt to bridge the gap that duty would create between father and son. "George wrote you a letter too," Catherine continued. "He wouldn't let me read it, but he spent a long time working on it. He said it was man stuff that he needed to share with you privately." The image of their eldest child wrestling with thoughts too complex for his years tugged at William's heart. George was beginning to understand the weight of his future responsibilities, and William recognized the importance of maintaining open communication about the challenges and privileges that lay ahead. "Charlotte made you a playlist," Catherine added, and despite the emotion of the moment, they both smiled. Their daughter had recently discovered her love of music and had become the family's self-appointed DJ for car rides and quiet Sunday mornings. "Let me guess," William said. "It includes at least 3 Taylor Swift songs, something from the Hamilton soundtrack, and that classical piece she heard at the last concert we attended." "You know your daughter well," Catherine laughed, and the sound seemed to lighten the weight of the moment without diminishing its significance. These details about their children served as both comfort and motivation for William. Knowing that each child was processing his departure in their own way, contributing their own gifts to sustain him during his absence, reminded him why the work he was about to undertake mattered. He wasn't just representing the crown. He was modeling for his children what it meant to serve something larger than oneself, while maintaining the connections that made such service meaningful. The final preparations were clearly complete. The aircraft crew was conducting their last safety checks, and the security detail was making subtle adjustments that indicated departure was imminent. Yet William and Catherine remained focused on each other, as if they could compress 6 weeks of conversation into these last precious minutes. The protocol officer approached with respectful hesitation, clearly aware of the delicate balance between duty and personal moment. "Your Royal Highness," he said quietly to William, "we need to begin final boarding procedures." William nodded acknowledgement, but didn't immediately step away from Catherine. Instead, he turned back to her with an expression that seemed to encompass years of shared experience, accumulated trust, and unspoken understanding. This was the moment they had both been dreading and knew was inevitable. "Before I go," William said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it, "I want you to know that everything I do over the next 6 weeks will be guided by what we've built together. Every decision, every speech, every moment when I have to represent our values to the world, it will all be informed by our partnership." Catherine felt her heart swell with pride and love. This was why she had fallen in love with William, why she had chosen this complex life, why she believed in the work they were doing together. He understood that royal duty wasn't something he carried alone. It was something they shared, even when separated by continents. "I know," she replied simply, "and I want you to know that every morning when I wake up, every evening when I put the children to bed, every moment when I have to be strong for our family, I'll be drawing on the strength we've built together." The exchange crystallized something fundamental about their relationship. They weren't just husband and wife. They were true partners in the deepest sense of the word. Each carried the other's strength, wisdom, and love into their individual responsibilities, making their separation not just bearable, but meaningful. As if by mutual understanding, they moved closer together. The world around them seemed to fade. The aircraft, the personnel, the cameras, the protocols. In that space, there were simply two people who loved each other, facing a temporary separation that felt momentous precisely because their connection was so deep. William reached up and gently touched Catherine's face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. The gesture was tender, protective, and utterly natural. Catherine leaned into his touch, closing her eyes for just a moment to memorize the feeling of his hand against her cheek. "I love you," William said, the words carrying the weight of everything they couldn't say in this public setting. It wasn't just a declaration. It was a promise, a reassurance, a commitment that transcended the immediate goodbye. "I love you too," Catherine replied, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. More than words can express. More than 6 weeks can diminish. More than duty can complicate. And then, in a moment that would be remembered and analyzed for years to come, they embraced. It wasn't a brief, formal goodbye or a carefully choreographed display for the cameras. It was a real, deep, desperate embrace between two people who were about to be separated and wanted to hold on to each other for as long as possible. William's arms encircled Catherine completely, pulling her close against him as if he could somehow shield her from the sadness of goodbye. Catherine's arms wrapped around his neck, her fingers threading through his hair in a gesture so intimate and unconscious that it spoke to years of loving familiarity. They held each other tightly, and for those watching, it was impossible to miss the genuine emotion of the moment. This wasn't performance. It was authentic human connection playing out under extraordinary circumstances. The embrace spoke to every person who had ever had to say goodbye to someone they loved, who had ever felt the ache of separation, who had ever wished they could hold on to a moment forever. Time seemed suspended as they held each other. Catherine could feel William's heartbeat against her chest, strong and steady despite the emotion of the moment. William breathed in the familiar scent of her perfume, trying to memorize it to carry with him across continents and time zones. The photographers captured the embrace from multiple angles, but even they seemed to understand they were witnessing something sacred. The clicking of cameras continued, but more quietly, more respectfully, as if loud shutter sounds might somehow intrude on the intimacy of the moment. 6 weeks, Catherine whispered against William's ear, her voice barely audible even to him. 42 days, William whispered back, their ongoing mathematical conversation about separation now transformed into something like a prayer. 1,008 hours, Catherine continued, and William could hear both the sadness and the determination in her voice. But not forever, William replied, completing the ritual. Never forever. The exchange was private, meant only for each other, but the intensity of their connection was visible to everyone watching. This was love under pressure, commitment tested by duty, partnership sustained by choice rather than convenience. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to separate. Their arms loosened gradually, neither wanting to be the first to let go completely. As they stepped apart, they maintained contact through their hands, fingers intertwined, unwilling to break their physical connection until absolutely necessary. Catherine's eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her expression was one of strength rather than sorrow. She had learned over the years how to be supportive rather than adding to William's burden, how to be sad about separation without making him feel guilty for fulfilling his duties. William's face reflected the same combination of emotion and resolve. He was clearly moved by the goodbye, clearly reluctant to leave, but also visibly committed to the work ahead of him. It was the expression of a man who had learned to carry love and duty in balance, each strengthening rather than competing with the other. "Take care of yourself," Catherine said, her voice now steady and clear. "Remember to eat properly, get enough sleep, and don't try to carry everyone else's expectations along with your own." "Take care of our family," William replied. "Give the children extra hugs from me, and remember that you don't have to be perfect for them. They just need you to be present." These final words of advice and care spoke to their deep knowledge of each other's tendencies and vulnerabilities. After years of marriage and partnership, they knew exactly what kind of support and reminders the other needed during times of stress and separation. The protocol officer approached again, and this time William nodded with resignation. The moment they had been dreading, but knew was inevitable, had finally arrived. The aircraft was ready, the schedule had to be maintained, and duty was calling with a voice that could no longer be postponed. William lifted Catherine's hand to his lips and kissed it gently, a gesture that was both formal and deeply personal. Catherine squeezed his hand in return, pouring all of her love and support into that final contact. "Go," she said softly, giving him permission to leave, understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to let someone fulfill their purpose, even when it means letting them go. "I'll call you tonight," William said, beginning to step backward toward the aircraft, their hands still connected until distance finally forced them apart. "I'll be waiting," Catherine replied, and in those 3 words was the promise that she would be there for him, supporting him across any distance, maintaining the connection that made separation possible precisely because it made reunion inevitable. As their hands finally separated and William turned toward the aircraft, both carried with them not just the sadness of goodbye, but the strength of love that was deep enough to withstand separation, committed enough to endure duty, and resilient enough to grow stronger rather than weaker when tested by circumstance. The embrace was over, but its impact had only just begun. In a few hours, images of their tender farewell would circle the globe, reminding millions of people what love looked like when it was tested, what commitment meant when it was challenged, and what partnership could accomplish when it was built on a foundation of authentic care and mutual respect.